our next notes page will be called proportions and percents. And so what I want us to look at first is this notes page that we took for our conversion rates. Okay, this is what we're going to be using for the rest of our unit. It's called cross, multiply, and divide. Okay, you guys learned a little bit of it with our conversion rates, and now we're just going to keep practicing it. Okay, so what it means is when you have two proportions set up on either side, okay, you're going to take these two numbers that are crisscross from each other, right, and you're going to multiply them together. 30 times 50. Okay? So then, after you've cross-multiplied, you're going to take the remaining number and you're going to divide by that. Okay? So we've cross-multiplied and divided 2075. Okay? So, well, there's just a fun one for you. Mr. Smiley, smiling upon all of you as you take your video notes. I don't know. Okay. So here is going to be our notes page for this notes. So go ahead and pause the video here and copy down everything you see. Okay, so we have, this is how our proportions are going to look when we're working with percents. Okay, you're going to have a percent out of 100. Okay, that's very important to remember. Anytime you see any number with a percent sign after it, that really means 33 out of 100. Okay, so a kind of interesting way to try and memorize this or remember it is, do you see this percent sign? Okay, if you rearrange the symbols in a percent sign, what do you get? 100. Okay, so percent sign has all the things able to make up a 100. Okay, and a percent sign means that that number, 48%, is the same as 48 hundredths, 48 out of 100. Okay, so percent means out of 100. So on our proportions, you're always going to have one number with a percent over 100, and then you're going to have your equal sign, of course, to make it into a proportion, and then you're going to have something else that's not percent. You're going to have the part, and you're going to have the whole. Okay, so let's talk about what the whole is. The whole is going to be the total, right? So doing the percent out of 100, that one's easy to create, but when it comes over to figuring out what number is going to be your part and what number is going to be your whole, that gets a little bit more tricky. Okay, so I have a keyword here. If ever you see the word of, okay, that number right next to the word of is going to be your whole. Okay, so you might want to like circle that or highlight it. Then when we go down to percent, always written with a denominator of 100, okay, and the key symbol is a little percent sign that can be rearranged to write as 100. And our part is whenever we're taking a piece of something. Now, I don't necessarily have a keyword for part, but if you use the keyword for whole and you use the key symbol for percent, the only number left over is going to be the part. Okay? So let's look at an example. Okay? If we were to have, well, okay, let's look at this. For fruit, okay, in a survey, 200 students choose their favorite snacks, okay? And then we're going to complete the table to find the number of students who chose each snack. So if for fruit, 23% of students chose fruit, okay, well our first fraction is 23 out of 100, right, because we saw the percent sign. And in our problem, do we know the part or the whole? Okay? Well, in this problem, they gave us 200. Now you have to decide, is 200 the whole or is 200 the part? Well, the part in this situation would be fruit, and the whole would be total number of students. So 200 is the whole. So it goes on the bottom. Okay? We cross multiply and we divide to figure out that 46 goes on the top there. Now let's pause and let's figure out cookies. Okay? So we have 15 over 100, right? That's the first part in our proportion. And what do we know? Do we know the part or do we know the whole? Well, since 200 is our whole, we know our whole. Then we can do cross multiply and divide to figure out what goes up here. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out what would go on our part. Okay, so if we did 200 times 15, okay, there's a quick trick for that one. You just take these zeros away. You do 15 times 2, and then you add these zeros back in at the end. Okay, so that's our cross multiply. And then what do we divide by? The only one that's left over, the 100. Divided by 100. There's a quick trick here. You move the decimal twice this way. You move the decimal twice this way. You have 30. Okay, so if we had 200 students, 30 of them would have chosen cookies. All right, let's go ahead and try this problem. If we have 60% of 320 marbles, okay, what do we have here? We're going to try and set up the proportion. Okay, 60%, that's going to be our first proportion. That's going to be 60 out of 100. Then we're going to write an equal sign. And is 320 going to be the part or is it going to be the whole? What does this keyword mean that that's going to be? The whole. Okay, so we have 60 out of 100 for the 60% equals, we don't know the part is the unknown, but we do know the whole, which is 320. Go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can cross multiply and divide. Okay, so I did a quick trick. I changed my number 60 over 100 to 6/10 and then to 3/5. Can I do that? Sure. Okay, if you didn't do this where you simplified your fraction, if you didn't simplify your fraction, that's okay. Because are we going to get the same number? We sure are. 192. So when you cross multiply and divide, you should have still gotten the number 192. Okay? So I'm not going to help you set up the proportion this time. This time I want you to set up your own proportion. Go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can solve this problem. Okay, so hopefully we set up our proportion like this. The 24 is a percent, so it's going to be 24 out of 100. And we have an equal sign. And we saw the word of, so that means we know that 320 is the whole. And so now we can either simplify our fraction to where it makes it easier, or we could just straight cross multiply and divide without simplifying our fraction. And once you cross multiplied and divided, you would get 76 and 8/10. Nope. Okay, so we have a decimal in our percent. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure this one out. Okay, so you just put a decimal in your fraction. Cross multiply, and then you divide. And your answer would be okay. Now let's switch it up a little bit. Now I'm going to ask, well, what percent is 60 of 360. So instead of asking you for what is the part, this time I'm giving you the part, I'm giving you the whole, and I'm asking for you to find the percent. So the missing piece is going to be the number that goes over 100, okay? What percent is 60 of 360? Okay, so then you cross multiply. 60 times 100 divided by 360. Now remember, you can always move your decimal over 1 if you'd like. So now we've got 600 divided by 36. Okay, and you would end up with 16. Then you'd keep going into the decimals, you keep adding zeros, and you'd find that that 6 keeps repeating. So you'd have 16 and 6/10 repeating. And that would be our answer. Okay, what about this kind of a problem? 15 is 75% of what? Now, if we remember what the word of means, of stands for the whole. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can set your proportions up correctly. Okay, so when you set your proportions up, you have 75%, okay, that one was the easy one. If you ever see a percent sign, you always know, well, you've already got one of your proportions, 75 out of 100. And we figured that we do not know what the whole is. Of what means that that is the unknown amount, okay? 15 is 75% of what? Okay, so that should have been your proportion. Then you can cross multiply and divide to figure out what goes here. Now there's a quick trick here in this instance. Okay, 75 divided by what gets you to 15? Well, if you do 75 divided by 15, you get 5. So 75 divided by 5 is 15. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. Okay, so that one could have been pretty easy there. Or you could always do cross multiply and divide. All right, one last question. Go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can solve this. All right, so this is how our proportions are set up. 640 is what percent? So we already know that we're missing the percent. Of 800, do you see the magic word of? That's how I know 800 went on the bottom. Okay, now how did I get from 800 to 100? Divided by 8. So how do I get to from 640? Divided by 8. Okay, so we're going to have 80%. All right, GT students, stick around for a couple more questions. The rest of y'all are free to go. Thank you. All right, go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can solve this problem. All right, so since we have 5% copper and they told us 15 grams of copper, well, we have our 5%, and we know that 15 copper, you have to match up copper and copper. Copper is the part. What is the whole? Okay, so then you cross multiply and divide and you get 300. Or you could say 5 times 3, 100 times 3, and you would have gotten the same thing. Okay, what about this one? Pause the problem and see if you can figure it out. Okay, so I set up 12 out of 300. That is my part and my whole. And I knew it was going to be something out of 100. So 300 divided by 3 gets us to 100. 12 divided by 3 gets us to 4%. All right, well, thank you guys so much for hanging out, and I'll see you tomorrow.